this could cause significant disruption in the stock market. This could cause significant price hikes when he campaigned on the economic issues of inflation under President Biden and then Vice President Kamala Harris.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today, the word of the day is tariffs. The United States has imposed 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, two of their biggest trading partners, as well as 10% on China. Canada has officially hit back, saying that they're going to impose 25% tariffs back on the United States. So we're speaking to Emily Jashinsky from Unherd, a White House reporter, about are we entering a global trade war? Has Donald Trump just completely shifted the dial for the rest of the world? We're also speaking to her about his comments about the DEI protocol in the aviation industry of the United States and why he chose to use those kind of comments when referring to a national tragedy last week. So all that this week on the Trump Report. Emily Jashinsky, a White House reporter from Unherd, thank you so much for your time today. We're only a few weeks into Donald Trump's presidency, and he's actually gone forward with these threats that he said he was going to place 25% tariffs on both Mexico and Canada. He's done that, as well as 10% tariffs on China. Can you walk me through the decision from the president to follow through with these threats?
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people thought maybe he would back down after having conversations with Claudia Sheinbaum and Justin Trudeau. But actually, what seems to have happened is it's hardened his position on this. There are 11th hour meetings happening at the White House right now as we talk with Claudia Sheinbaum and Justin Trudeau between Donald Trump. If, maybe it's possible something happens, but these are the largest, most significant tariffs from a U.S. president since 1930. So it was easy to see why some people thought, well, maybe this was a threat. But it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is because Donald Trump has believed in tariffs and protectionism going back decades. He's never really been joking about tariffs. It was never hardball for him. 25% is extremely significant. When you look, though, at, for example, some of the things we bring in here in the United States from Canada, some of the things we bring in from Mexico, Donald Trump is basically saying you need to take drastic measures to up domestic production. So farming, manufacturing, some of those things, he's trying to bring the industry back to the United States. Whether this is the way to do it, I mean, he's going to have significant, one thing he cares about a lot is stock prices. He also cares a lot, stock stability. And so this could cause significant disruption in the stock market. This could cause significant price hikes when he campaigned on the economic issues of inflation under President Biden and then Vice President Kamala Harris. So there are some serious challenges ahead for Donald Trump, but he is like an actual hardened ideologue when it comes to protectionism being good for domestic production. So that's, he took such a significant step. That's going to be actually tested in the coming weeks.
Well, we've just found that Canada has announced that it will be placing 25% tariffs on US goods. So Justin Trudeau did follow through with that threat that he would retaliate. He actually said we won't back down from Donald Trump's threats. Regardless, he's only in power for however long before someone else steps up to the plate to take over his role. But he followed through with what he said. He was going to retaliate. Now, if Canada was going to retaliate, or Mexico was going to retaliate, or China was going to retaliate, there were fears that this would lead to a broader all-out trade war. And it does seem like we're creeping further towards that, because Trump said if they retaliate, then he's going to place even further tariffs on these countries, the two of the biggest trading partners that the United States has. So, Emily, there is now appetite for fear that this will lead to a broader all-out trade war between these countries.
I think we're hurtling towards that very quickly because for Justin Trudeau, for example, I mean, his tariffs will hurt the United States a lot less than the U.S. tariffs will hurt Canada. But what is he supposed to do? It just completely roll over to the U.S. president when he thinks he's being unreasonable from Trudeau's perspective, from most of the Canadian public's perspective. The national anthem, the American national anthem, was getting booed at hockey games over the weekend. So he's absolutely in a tough spot. And maybe Donald Trump comes up with other ways to, practice the quote art of the deal with Sheinbaum and Trudeau in the days ahead. Maybe there are other things that they can put on the table that can, ease some of these tariffs from Trump's perspective, but he wants to, I mean, by Trump's own argument, he wants to see dramatic change. And really the only way to get dramatic change is to have dramatic tariffs. So that's, you don't get to sort of test that theory if you're Trump without going through with it. So they may not have much luck negotiating with him. I'm sure there are other things they can negotiate with. I mean, Mexico, for example, the geopolitical concerns that Trump has when it comes to fentanyl, drug trafficking, migration. There's a lot more that they can kind of work with beyond just tariffs. But we'll see how successful they are at getting a better deal out of Donald Trump.
But why didn't Trump edge towards a different scenario, a different way of getting the attention of China, Mexico, and Canada? Because if anyone who's not really across the fentanyl crisis, they probably wouldn't understand why these three countries are involved in the illegal migration coming in through the United States, but also that drug smuggling. And you, of course, have a lot of experience covering this as someone that was situated at the border for so long. But a lot of the drugs are being manufactured in China, specifically fentanyl, brought through into the United States through Mexico, but then a lot of the drugs are actually being made in Canada as well, again being smuggled into the United States being the bearer of all of this, along with illegal human smuggling. So tariffs was always the main threat for these three countries, but there could be other ways of doing it. And so I wonder what he could do besides inflicting these 25% tariffs that will have a trickle-down effect into Americans.
With Canada, I think a lot of Canadians are suspicious that this really doesn't have a lot to do with drugs and human trafficking because, frankly, Mexico is a much bigger problem, and there's some drugs that come actually from the U.S. into Canada, and there's some humans who cross from the U.S. into Canada. So I think on the Canadian side, they're correct that it really is about domestic industry and production. In Mexico, Trump has taken all kinds of executive actions just in like his first week, a couple of weeks, that have already dramatically curbed the situation. So in some sense, Sheinbaum loses leverage on that regard if Donald Trump is taking all of these things independently to deal with the drug trafficking. Now, the drug trafficking is different than the human trafficking. It's going to be a lot harder because there's so much that just comes through in terms of like commercial trade through the border every single day, that it's not just, humans pouring across the border. There's going to be a lot of opportunities either way for drugs to come in and out. So I think that will absolutely be an item of negotiation if Sheinbaum wants these tariffs to decrease, to be more precise. But yeah, you're right. A lot of these precursor chemicals come from China. They're shipped to Mexico, and there is absolutely stuff that Mexico can do to start tracking them with way more precision as those chemicals come in, cracking down on the cartels, which control swaths of Mexican territory. If they don't want U.S. involvement, which is what we have seen, they don't want U.S. military involvement. Not everybody in the U.S. wants U.S. military involvement. That is going to require a whole lot more effort on behalf of the Mexican government. So that's something that's very much on the table. And I think, to your point, it could be one of the things that gets Mexico's tariffs maybe lessened or made more precise.
And there's so many things that the United States do import from all three countries, but a lot of it will come down to agricultural things like food and other stuff, but a lot of toys and manufactured goods will also kind of take the brunt of these big tariffs. But Donald Trump rode his campaign on the fact that he was going to tackle the immigration crisis while also getting money into the pockets of Americans. His entire campaign is actually surrounded around the economy and how he's going to get the US economy into a really strong position. So I wonder, Emily, when he says he's going to impose these 25% tariffs, how he will vocalize this to the American people when it does end up putting a dent in their pockets, because that's the reality with tariffs, is that they do end up affecting the country that are imposing them.
Absolutely. And even the best case scenario for Donald Trump is that over the course of years, this rebuilds domestic manufacturing and creates a better economy here at home for people in the US. But that is not something that happens within weeks, months, or even a year. That's something that is a very long process, and people have short memories in politics. So it's a huge challenge. I think it's why Republicans right now here in DC are obsessed with a tax bill. So the Trump tax cuts in 2017 are expiring. Donald Trump and Republicans on Capitol Hill are working really, really hard to figure out how to pass their tax bill really quickly so that people have tax cuts. And as prices go up, which if you're doing an immigration crackdown, you're doing an immigration crackdown and tariffs, the prices are going to go up, whether you think it's right or wrong. The prices are going up, and so if they can get a tax bill across the finish line, they can then tell the American people, look, you're seeing maybe increased prices at the grocery store, but you're also getting more money back in your wallet, and people can sort of feel good about Republicans and Trump if they see the tax cut coming back into their bank accounts.
And with Trump, it's all about, I guess, legacy and how people will consider the way he handled the 4 years, and the economy is his biggest strong suit, according to him. But we're going to move on to a different topic that happened last week. The obviously tragic plane crash and Black Hawk helicopter collision that resulted in over 60 deaths. It hasn't even been surfaced from the water. They're still working on the operation. And it's a recovery mission. Obviously, we know that every single person on the plane, as well as in the helicopter, did die. But the big story surrounding this tragedy, Emily, has been Donald Trump's choice of wording. Within the day that it happened, or the day after, he blamed the former government's DEI policy of getting people of the DEI to be working in this federal aviation. So it was an interesting thing to say when there's been such a big tragedy and he's been called out on it. And I want your thoughts as someone working as a White House reporter, how the media reacted to that in his press conference.
Yeah, the media was completely shocked to hear that from a sitting president. And it is, sort of an immediate politicization. And the media does not like to politicize tragedies right away. The media sort of tends to be uncomfortable with it, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, whether they're saying something left or right. It's sort of a norm that something just doesn't get politicized at the sort of earliest stages. So people were definitely shocked by that. And from Trump's perspective, it hasn't quite been substantiated yet. And that isn't to say that it can't be, because it's possible when we're looking at air traffic control, for example, that they were really trying hard to hit quotas of different employees, and were understaffed because they were turning people away who weren't fitting those quotas. That is a possibility, because they were understaffed and they were using those hiring practices. But I think, throw out such a massive argument like that, suggestion like that, in the earliest phases of an incredible tragedy, the largest commercial airline disaster in the United States in a very long time, they're really, really going to have to bring the receipts so that Trump can kind of recover some credibility, not just with the media, but I think some people in the public. It's exhausting, and it was a horrifying. It's one of those things that's just everybody's worst nightmare. I took off from that airport a few hours before this happened, and for people in DC, for people everywhere, anybody who flies, it hits close to home. So it feels personal anywhere in the country that you're watching in your living room. And if Trump can substantiate it, he'll have to do that soon. But to throw it out without any backing argument was setting himself up, I think, to lose some momentum, especially with the press that had been sort of initially amazed by the speed with which he was reforming the American government. It definitely halted the momentum.
But still, even now as we report this on a Monday, and they're going to actually pull the wreckage out today, I think. But at this stage, days later, there still is no evidence to suggest that these woke policies from the FAA was the reason why this collision happened in the first place.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is like they don't have any. What we know is this Black Hawk helicopter was flying off of its path. We know that it was off of its approved path that it was supposed to be going. It was flying way higher than it was supposed to be flying over the Potomac River. There are these things that we understand, like these pieces of the puzzle, but the puzzle has not been put together. And it's been a week now. I agree. I think they don't have substantiating evidence at this time that there was some like woke DEI, unless they're talking about just the pilot being a woman of the Black Hawk, which is what we know, and that's not necessarily DEI. That might not have anything to do with it whatsoever. So they absolutely need to, if that's their story, they need better evidence for sure to substantiate it.
Emily, Trump's argument of why he said that was it was common sense that it would be attributed to the DEI. And then Democratic Senator Tim Kaine said, I think it was on CNN, he said those comments were stomach turning to watch the president say that while bodies were still being recovered from the wreckage. How do you think the public is going to react to this fatal tragedy, coupled with the fact that a newly elected president was kind of tone deaf in his immediate response?
You know, it's Trump because, with Trump, I think everybody's expectations of how he acts in a moment of national crisis are, to be frank, low. I don't think people expect him to be the national healer, the healer in chief. So I don't know that it necessarily, that it dramatically changes the way people see Donald Trump. I doubt that at this point, because he's never sort of functioned that way. If we remember the earliest days of COVID, he sort of had some moments where he seemed like he was leaning into what's the norm of presidential behavior, but it didn't last that long, and if it ever lasted at all. So I don't know that it's dramatically changing the way people expected to see Donald Trump. I do think that there's an argument Republicans were really leaning on, that DEI has made our institutions less efficient in different ways. But again, to the question, I mean, making that case in the earliest phase of a national tragedy or reaction to a national tragedy, you really need to be able to substantiate it for people to respect where you're going with it. So that's a big problem.
The other thing on that note is that he's not just calling out, a specific air traffic controller. He's calling out the FAA and basically saying that this is a result of the DEI, kind of insinuating that he felt like this would always happen. And there was a whistleblower that spoke to the New York Post, I think, that said that he was turned away with a 100% success rate on his test because he didn't meet that kind of requirement. They wanted someone with a disability or the fit into the DEI category. But it's an interesting thing to say, that to insinuate this is always going to happen, because all that does really is install a bit of fear into commercial passengers. How many flights are being taken off from the United States? All you've done is just say that people should be scared to fly in general in the US.
This is a really good point, because he was also asked if it was safe to fly, and he said yes. So if both of these things are true, or how can both of these things be true at the same time, they would answer, because new Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy immediately got rid of DEI standards. But actually, one thing they should be doing then, if we take their argument seriously, is they have to hire a bunch of more qualified people, like, immediately. Otherwise, the institution that is, by their argument, being hampered by DEI is currently hampered by DEI, and people are flying all over the country. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how those things can be true at the same time. They would say they already changed the standards, but that does take time. So it's not an immediate fix.
Yeah. Emily Jashinsky from Unherd, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.